comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, you sound like Brett Stevens now, with all due respect. It's a joke. That's a real time.
And you sound like him, who looks like Rachel Maddow.
Oh, buckle up, because the woke echo chamber just got torched, and the arsonist, none other than Bill Maher, the last truth teller standing in a world gone mad. In a moment so raw it practically sizzled through the screen, Maher ripped the mask off an MSNBC darling who thought he could casually drop delusion into the discourse and walk away unscathed. Spoiler, he couldn't. So who's the unfortunate soul getting their worldview obliterated on national television? Ken Martin. Yeah, don't worry, you're not alone if you've never heard the name. He strolled into Maher's studio, looking like he was ready for a gentle panel chat, and left dazed and blinking, trying to figure out how it all went sideways. But the real fireworks didn't start until Chris Hayes chimed in, cozy in his cable news bubble, ready to peddle the usual Trump-pocalypse narrative. Then Maher struck, with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of someone sick of watching his side cannibalize itself. Maher didn't ask a complicated question. He tossed Hayes a softball. How do the Democrats plan to stop losing? Seems fair, right? But instead of clarity, Hayes spiraled into a chaos monologue that sounded like ChatGPT trapped in a panic attack.
Ken Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot. We didn't get our message out. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but that's it. And I've said this before to Democrats. No, you did. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You did get your message out, and people don't like the message.
He bounced from Musk to Trump, threw in USAID conspiracies, tossed out imagery about people with unremovable devices in their bodies. Yes, seriously, and somehow looped back to ISIS prison guards and rogue 20-somethings hacking the Treasury. It was part science fiction horror flick, part political thriller, and fully unhinged. And Maher, he just sat there. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, like a punch waiting to land. And land it did. With one line, one shift of tone, Maher did what no MSNBC anchor dares to do. He demanded accountability. Not from Trump, not from Elon, from the Democrats themselves. From the party that, in his words, hasn't rerouted a damn thing since crashing into the iceberg named 2016. Because while Hayes was busy reciting buzzwords like he was paid by the syllable, Maher brought it back to reality. Reminding viewers that no matter how many demons the left conjures, they still haven't explained how they lost the working class, bled moderates, or keep flopping in battleground states. Hayes wanted to sound profound, but what we got was a scrambled TED Talk in distress, with no clear plan, no vision, and absolutely no accountability, just vibes, victimhood, and veiled panic. And Maher, he saw through it all. In a world of tribal talking points and political cosplay, he ripped the veil clean off and left MSNBC holding nothing but smoke. Chris Hayes thought he was dropping intellectual bombs. Instead, he handed Bill Maher the perfect setup for one of the coldest mic drops in political talk show history. It all started when Hayes invoked the ghost of Steve Jobs. Yes, that Steve Jobs, to justify the Democrats deciding what voters should want, rather than, actually listening to them. According to Hayes, elections aren't about reflection or course correction. They're about crafting some elite data-driven fairy tale and forcing it down the throats of people who didn't ask for it. In his words, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. It's the Democrats' job to tell them. Read that again. Voters aren't supposed to choose. They're supposed to comply. That's not campaigning. That's conditioning. But then came the thunder. Maher wasn't playing games. When Ken Martin, another loyal soldier from the party of delusion, repeated the age-old excuse, "We didn't get our message out," Maher didn't even blink. He lit the fuse and dropped this one-liner like a truth bomb from orbit. No, you did get your message out. And that's the problem. Silence. No spin, no escape. Just 5 words that flattened every desperate excuse in the Democratic playbook. Because Maher gets what the strategists and pundits don't, it's not about how slick your rollout is or how many focus groups you ran. It's about what you're selling, and if people are running from it like it's toxic waste, maybe, just maybe, the product sucks. Hayes tried to sound visionary, like some Silicon Valley prophet predicting the future of politics. But what came out was a Frankenstein theory about innovation, data maps, and reverse engineering Obama and Trump like they were iPhone models. It wasn't inspiring, it was incoherent. And while Hayes swirled in his intellectual fog, Maher sliced through with brutal clarity. The Democrats' problem isn't messaging. It's the message. Voters did hear it, loud and clear, and they said no thanks. The left can't keep hiding behind analytics and whiteboard diagrams. At some point, you have to face the brutal reality that your ideas aren't landing, that your promises ring hollow, that your vision doesn't connect with real people living in a real world. Just when you thought Chris Hayes couldn't twist logic any further, he stumbles headfirst into a statement so foggy, so drenched in self-importance, you'd think a parody account scripted it. With a glazed-over tone of fake moderation, Hayes babbled something about patriotic pluralism, and how if parents want to transition their kids, the rest of us should just stay the fuck out of it. Oh, really? So now it's patriotic to shut your mouth while minors undergo life-altering medical procedures they often can't legally consent to themselves, because a political movement decided this is the hill to die on? Nice try. But Hayes wasn't done. He delivered it like some kind of moral mic drop, smugly wrapping the entire debate in the soft blanket of choice. Except Bill Maher, true to form, took a blowtorch to the nonsense. Maher didn't flinch. He ripped the veil off this carefully crafted illusion and hit them with reality. The real debate isn't about parental freedom, it's about whether children can make irreversible medical decisions without their parents even knowing. And here's where it got explosive.
But the argument is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid is...
Yes.
Thank you, one person who knows that.
But I mean...
Somebody knows that is the case.
In places like California, yes, kids can seek transition-related treatment, while schools and officials keep it hidden from their parents. You read that right. Schools, not families. Get the final word? Bureaucrats with zero personal investment in a child's life can legally cut parents out of the loop. Let that sink in. The people who clothe, feed, and fight for their children every day are suddenly labeled as interfering in their own child's health decisions. And when someone in Maher's audience had the guts to say it out loud, he thanked them. Because the silence on this insanity has lasted way too long. And now the left is desperately trying to memory hole their own talking points. The very ones they screamed from the rooftops just months ago. Why? Because those ideas blew up in their faces. Because parents across the country woke up and said, no more. Because the silent majority finally realized that progress had crossed the line into dystopia. And Bill Maher, he called it out without hesitation. While Hayes stammered about pluralism, Maher reminded him that this isn't about diversity. It's about deception. The left wasn't promoting family autonomy. They were bulldozing it. And let's not forget the cherry on top. The moment the conversation turned to the White House press corps and the sudden rise of new media, Maher's guest tried to play it cute. It's great. It reflects America. Sure, but when pressed, even she admitted that most of these so-called new voices were right-leaning. Why? Because legacy media sold out, and people are done waiting for truth from liars in suits. Oh, and Axios? The outlet that got the coveted new media seat at the White House? The guest called it fresh, but Maher's panel laughed it off. New media? Axios was sold for $500 million and run by a Washington insider. That's not new. That's old media in a hoodie. Maher nailed it again. Old media is worth $1. New media is the future. Jeff Bezos scooped up the Washington Post for pennies, and it's still bleeding relevance like a sinking ship. Meanwhile, podcast empires, YouTubers, and digital outsiders are shaping the political narrative now, and the establishment can't do a damn thing about it. Byron Donalds even chimed in with a dagger-sharp line that exposed the real truth. Legacy media isn't dying, it's already dead. This isn't just a media shift, it's a full-blown information rebellion. The gatekeepers have lost their keys, the audience has left the theater. And Maher, the last liberal with a spine, just kicked the door wide open. Because when you strip away the slogans, the fake moralizing, and the self-righteous lectures, what's left? A radical message voters are rejecting in droves, a party frantically backpedaling from its own positions, and a media empire cracking under the weight of its own hypocrisy. Welcome to the new reality. And it's not MSNBC approved. Legacy media isn't just watching the democratic machine crumble, they're holding the hammer and nails, helping seal the coffin. From censoring inconvenient truths to spoon-feeding the public pre-approved talking points, these corporate dinosaurs didn't just fall behind, they dug their own grave. And in doing so, they handed the mic to independent media, podcasters, and digital voices who said, enough is enough. But the real jaw-dropper? When one of Bill Maher's left-leaning guests smugly tried to throw cold water on Trump's revolutionary move, welcoming podcasters and independent journalists into the White House. Her argument? Axios doesn't count as new media because it's been around for 5 years and sold for $500 million. That's it. That was her grand point, as if the size of a platform cancels out its impact. You could almost see the desperation behind her eyes, because deep down she knows what's happening. The old guard is dying. People aren't buying the polished lies and prepackaged narratives anymore. They're tuning into real voices, unfiltered truth, and raw authenticity. And that scares the hell out of legacy media. Here's the brutal reality. Today's political battlefield isn't one with print columns and cable news segments. It's fought and won through viral clips, podcast bombs, and influencers speaking straight to the people. The left can't understand it, can't control it, and sure as hell can't stop it. But let's pivot to something even more infuriating. Elon Musk, love him or hate him, is one of the most innovative minds alive. The man wants to expand rocket launches at Vandenberg Space Force Base, pushing boundaries for American science and tech. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Wrong. A bureaucrat with a clipboard and a grudge, Commissioner Carol Hart, slammed the brakes. Why? Not because of environmental issues, not because of safety concerns, but because Musk dared to have a political opinion. She literally said the company's CEO had aggressively injected himself into the election conversation. Translation? Think differently, and we'll block you. This is where the mask slips. The bureaucracy isn't neutral. It's weaponized, it's petty, and it punishes you for daring to step outside the narrative. Musk wasn't asking for special treatment. He was asking to expand American innovation. And they said no, because of who he is. That's not democracy, that's ideological gatekeeping in a trench coat. Let's be honest, under the Democratic regime, the government didn't just push policies, they launched a full-blown power grab. Agencies became political attack dogs. Schools were turned into battlegrounds for social engineering. Regulations weren't about safety, they were tools for silencing dissent. This wasn't leadership, this was punishment disguised as progress. And now that they're losing control, now that the tide's turning, they want to cry about transparency and unity. Spare us. You don't get to play the victim when you spent years steamrolling the opposition and silencing parents, innovators, and journalists alike. Then came the part that made heads spin. The great moral meltdown from Joe Scarborough. Sitting across from Bill Maher, this guy managed to deliver a rambling, incoherent, completely unhinged take on misinformation. Maher made a simple, obvious point. Both sides spread lies. Even Mark Cuban agreed. But Scarborough? He couldn't handle it. He spiraled. He twisted himself into a pretzel, tried to rope in Elon Musk, Trump, and God knows who else, and ended up sounding like a parody of himself. Even Cuban, usually the calm one, looked genuinely confused. The man couldn't concede that disinformation is bipartisan, because to him, and many like him, the only acceptable enemy is the right. It's a blind spot so massive, it makes his entire argument collapse under its own weight. And Maher? He dropped the mic. You sound like Bret Stephens. Boom! One line. That's all it took. A punch so clean, so devastating, even the studio felt it. That wasn't just a clapback. It was an execution. Maher saw the spin, tore it apart, and reminded everyone that blind partisanship doesn't make you morally superior. It makes you delusional. And this is where the left's real problem lies. They're stuck in a bubble, clinging to slogans and moral superiority while ignoring real people with real concerns. They don't want conversation. They want control. And when they lose it, they lash out at podcasters, parents, entrepreneurs, and even comedians like Maher who dare to call out the hypocrisy. If the Democratic Party wants a future, they better wake up, fast, because voters aren't looking for recycled talking points and elite-approved narratives. They want results. They want leaders who listen, who solve problems, and who understand that the world has changed. That's what made Trump's media strategy brilliant. That's what gave independent voices their power. And that's why the old model is crashing and burning in real time. So unless the left ditches the elitism, stops pretending bureaucracy equals morality, and actually starts connecting with everyday Americans, they're not just going to lose elections, they're going to lose relevance. And on that explosive note, we're wrapping up today's takedown. Thanks for watching. And you already know, we'll be right back in your feed with more of the truth they don't want you to hear. See you next time.